Kelly Shaw reporting for Rocky Mountain Sasquatch Organization. I'm in East Idaho investigating two separate Bigfoot sightings. They both happened in November. They happened 3 days apart and were only separated by less than 20 miles. After investigating both of these Bigfoot sightings on two separate expeditions, I realized they happened only 3 days apart from each other and were separated by less than 20 miles. Perhaps the same Bigfoot was seen on both separate sighting encounters. Idaho, November 4th and November 7th. The first one was near Bone Road. 3 days later, Highs Hot Springs near South Fork Snake River. Here's the first sighting that was submitted by one of the many witnesses that seen it that day. On November 4th, 2006, me and my family were driving through the foothills above Idaho Falls near Willow Creek when my sister, fiance, daughter, and nephew said that they had seen something off to the side of the road. I stopped and turned around so I could shine the lights from the Bronco on whatever it was. When we got turned around, the lights from the vehicle couldn't hit it, so I decided to step out with the flashlight. Then I shined the light on it. It stood up on its hind legs about 30 feet from me. It was standing in a burrow pit that was 2 feet deeper than the road I was on, but it was at least a foot taller than me, and I am 6 foot tall. When I seen it, I started yelling at it, and it ducked down every time I would stop making noise. It would start to raise its head again. When I backed up and got into the Bronco, it jumped up and ran after us, and chased us quite a ways. We all seen it, but I could not make out any facial features. I have heard stories in the past from friends and family of sightings in the same area, but never paid much attention. I'm an avid hunter and fisherman. I spend a lot of time in the outdoors. I have hunted and fished in this area all my life. I have seen elk, deer, antelope, badger, bear, just about everything that has walked or crawled or swam. And I have never seen anything like what I seen that night. It was bigger than any bear that I'd ever seen, and I hunt in the Selway, where there is a large population of bear, and what we seen that night was not a bear. There have been several other incidences in the area where I've been out there hunting and have seen figures up on the hill just kind of out of range to tell exactly what they are. And we've also heard screams in this area before, and one time down by the bridge we heard something whimpering like a baby. We reported it to the sheriff's department, but they found nothing. There were 5 witnesses all together that were driving home when they saw this Bigfoot sighting. It happened about 8 p.m. at night, and it was full moon, so there was a little bit of light even though it was after dark. Thick with willows down at the creek. Follow-up investigator report by BFR investigator Nancy Jones. I spoke with the 2 adult witnesses over the phone about 30 minutes. They were able to recall a few more details about their close encounter. The adult male witness said the color of the animals was either very dark, brown, or black. It was huge with extremely wide shoulders. He said it was over half as wide as the Bronco he was driving. The animal stood about 1 foot taller than the 6 foot tall witness as viewed from the road, and the animal was standing just off the road in a burrow pit. Given a 2 foot deep burrow pit, the animal's height is estimated to be about 9 feet. He added that the animal chased their Bronco, which was going as fast as 30 miles an hour. He said it ran alongside the vehicle in the burrow pit and crossed the road behind the vehicle at some point. The witness stated that the road was graveled and winding, making even 30 miles per hour difficult to drive safely. From the time he first faced the animal, the witness could hear it making a strange growling whine noise. It kept this up while running with the Bronco. One of the 2 adult female witnesses, the driver's fiance, confirmed the above details. She had a better view than the driver did once they began to drive away, and added some physical details. She said the animal's arms were quite long, more than half the body length. The hair was very thick and a little bit longer than a bear's. While running, the animal was looking in at the vehicle's occupants from no more than 20 feet away. In the darkness, no facial or anatomical details were visible. She stressed that the animal was very large and fast. It had no trouble keeping up with the 30-mile-per-hour Bronco. She said that all the passengers were terribly frightened and screaming and even crying in fear. The female witness mentioned another incident that same year, July 2006, which may be connected to the above sighting. While driving with her fiancé and his daughter in the mountains of Clark County, the daughter looked out the window and said there was a naked black man running through the hills. The two adults paid no attention to this remark and attributed it to childhood fantasy. In retrospect, now both adults wonder if she might have seen the same or similar animal that they encountered this night. Bigfoot sighting hot spot. We're going to bring you the other Bigfoot sighting that happened just 20 miles from here. Only 3 days later, this happened on November 4th. That next one happened on November 7th. 3 days later, along the South Fork Snake River, East Idaho. This is the report that was submitted. Encounter happened on 7th of November 2006. I voted in the Idaho election at 8 a.m. Then I went straight home and loaded my 2 horses to go elk hunting for 3 days in the Big Hole Mountains east of where I live. I had a camp all set up by noon. I decided to go for a horse ride and maybe hunt a little before dark. The creek drainage I planned to hunt was Big Burns Creek. I rode up this drainage as far as Bear Trap, the third canyon coming into this drainage from the west. I tied the horses up at the mouth of the canyon and decided to hunt for a few hours before it got dark on the ridge on the north side of Bear Trap and south of Temple Peak. I arrived back at the horses just as it was getting dark. I took my backpack off and tied it in the saddle of the horse I had ridden on so I wouldn't have to pack it out. I slung my rifle over my shoulder and got back up on my second horse. I had ridden approximately a half a mile when the encounter took place. Riding south of Big Burns Creek, running parallel along on my left side and making its normal loud babbling cascading down over the rocks. Just as I was entering the confluence of where Little Burns Creek came down from the east at my left and entering into Burns Creek, I heard the very loud, voluminous, high-pitched, slightly raspy scream. This scream completely overpowered the noise coming from the creek. It screamed again and again. Each scream lasted 3 to 4 seconds. The screams didn't noticeably change in pitch or tone from the beginning to end. It was just an intense scream, like a large animal that had just been startled. My horse that had been following behind us came trotting up to my side about 3 yards away just beneath a tree. Both horses just stood there like a couple of statues frozen in place. The air thermals were going down the 2 canyons, so these animals and my horses could not smell one another. My scent was drifting down and to the right because of the air coming from the Little Burns Canyon, and their scent was being carried down and to the left because of the air coming down Big Burns Canyon. Wow, good elk hunter. He knows exactly where all the smells are going. The animal doing the screaming was slightly to my left at approximately 40 yards, standing right in the middle of Big Burns Creek. All that I was thinking was maybe I had just ridden into a mountain lion. I think I was just right after the second scream that I heard the sounds of the second animal. It was 40 to 50 yards east of the one doing the screaming. Then I heard a double whistle, followed by 4 or 5 fast verbalized grunts. Sounded like, ugh, ooh, ugh, ugh. The whistle seemed to be like a man who would lay his lip over his teeth and whistle to try and get somebody's attention clear across the canyon. This loud whistle and grunts also overpowered the sounds coming from both creeks. It seemed to me the second was communicating with the first one doing the screaming, and I just couldn't put any animal to those sounds. I've hunted elk with a bow for many years, and I think I've heard just about every sound an elk can possibly make. The whistles and grunts coming from them were not an elk. Elk don't scream like the scream I was hearing. Big cats don't whistle and grunt like the sound I heard from the second one. By then, I was wide awake and fully alert. I didn't have a light on my person. I had 2 lights in the left side pocket of my pack, tied on the other horse. After much effort, I was able to get the other horse to come up aside me and the horse I was riding. It took a little while to break both horses out of their trance. Once I did, I got both horses next to each other, and I was able to remove my Energizer headlamp and mini-mag flashlight from the pack. I put the headlight on and got both lights turned on. Looking down in the middle of the creek where the screaming was coming from, there were these eyes of a predator. They seemed large because they were reflecting so much light back at me. They were reflecting exactly the same color that I was broadcasting from my lights. The headlamp was a white diode mode, and the mini-mag was slightly yellow color to it, so the eyes were reflecting mostly white with a slight tinge of gold. Having the lights turned on, it didn't stop it from screaming. It continued to scream another 3-4 times while the lights were on it, for a total of 6-7 loud screams, all the same volume, length, and intensity. Although I was very concerned, I wasn't terribly afraid. My heart wasn't pounding with adrenaline. I was wide awake though, and I didn't feel as if my life was threatened because the one doing the screaming stayed put and wasn't getting any closer or being aggressive. I felt more like I was the one scaring this animal. I must have blinked my eyes at just the right time because all of a sudden the eyes disappeared and I didn't see which direction it went. I sat there looking and listening for about 2 more minutes. Hearing and seeing nothing more, I thought whatever it was probably left the area. I kicked my horse to go on down the trail. He didn't want to move. I gently talked to him, telling him it's okay, and kept kicking and encouraging him. I think he could still see something out there in the dark that I couldn't see. He finally started down the trail. I still had my lights on and kept looking at the edge of the creek nearest me, which was about 10 to 15 yards away. I expected something to jump out of the creek toward me at any second. When I had traveled down the trail about the 40 yards or so, I looked up on the other side of the creek. There, standing side by side, approximately 25 to 30 yards away, were 2 sets of eyes. My guess is that one doing the whistle and grunts came down the 40-50 yards to help the frightened screaming one. When it arrived, the screaming stopped and it got out of the bank with its buddy. The eyes seemed to be about level with mine as I sat on my horse with the 2 lights. I still could not make out the outlines of their bodies, the other opposite bank. One set of eyes was up higher than the other. I sat there on the horse staring at the 2 sets of eyes for about a full minute. Then one on my right slowly turned to the left, and it verified to me that it was a predator. Its left eye slowly narrowed to its right eye and disappeared almost at the same time as the right eye. Then the one on my left turned and followed behind the first. I sat on my horse for a couple more minutes looking for any glint of eyes as they moved away from me, but I never saw them again. About 6 months later, May 4th of 2007, I talked to my son, and he was into Bigfoot, and he thinks maybe I had a Bigfoot sighting. He told me that people had been seeing Bigfoot in the area. I went and talked to some mountain lion hunters and fishing game, told them what I had heard. Nobody could really explain it. Out of frustration, I finally called Jeff Meldrum of Pocatello. He wasn't surprised. He gets these types of calls all the time. After the first 2007, my son told me of some Bigfoot sighting that was near Bone Creek, only 25 miles, or Bone Road, about 25 miles away from me. My son lent me the book, written by Jeff Meldrum, Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science. I learned a few things about reading the book. April 29th, me and my son, we went back to the location where this happened. My son went over to where I saw both of the eyes. They were a good foot or 2 above my son's eyes. So they were 7-8 feet tall, whatever was standing there. And then we found a 17-inch footprint, 5 inches wide, about an inch deep. The hills of these footprints were really deep. I may have had a Bigfoot sighting. I've heard the expression of putting one's foot in his mouth, but I really felt awful when I realized I just screwed up the only possible track by putting my foot in it to get a measurement. And that, as they say, is about the size of it. At first I thought I was losing my mind because I couldn't pace those sounds with any animal I've ever heard, but now after learning all I could about these animals for the last 5 months, I'm about 95% sure that I had a Bigfoot encounter or experienced the biggest bull elk in Idaho. This is definitely a Bigfoot sighting hot spot. He may very well have had some Bigfoot communicating with each other, screaming at each other, one screaming at him and his horses. The Bigfoot sighting that happened 3 days earlier, yeah, I think there was Bigfoot in this area, and he may very well have seen Bigfoot that night. I hope you enjoyed us taking you to the location, or as close to the location as we get to some Bigfoot sightings. Keep on watching. We're going to keep on squatching.